An ever-increasing body of engaged citizens in Clinton County interested in giving direction to our leaders and planning for the future of our community. V2A's primary goals are: 1. Celebrate, support, and encourage participation in the multitude of action groups that are working to improve our community. 2. Attract 3,000 new individuals and families to the region by 2040. 3. Create a dynamic and engaged public to address the future of our community. And 4. Promote a sense of regional pride. V2A will reach these goals by supporting and developing activities and initiatives associated to transportation, recreation, education, and the arts. V2A is apolitical and does not endorse candidates. Both mayoral candidates have had involvement and assisted with V2A initiatives, and we are equally appreciative of their contributions. Tonight's moderators are Mrs. Colleen Lemza, down here on the right, and Dr. Julia Overton Healy, sitting center. Dr. Overton Healy joined SUNY Plattsburgh as the director of the Director of the Career Development Center in 2014. She is a frequent speaker and facilitator at regional and national conferences focusing on career education and on women's leadership. She is also the CEO of Skytop Strategies, a coaching firm providing services to new professionals. She and her husband Kelly reside in the city of Plattsburgh. Colleen Lemza is an associate professor in the Journalism and Public Relations Department at SUNY Plattsburgh, where she focuses on experiential learning. In her time at SUNY Plattsburgh, she created the student-run public relations agency Cardinal PR and developed the Shine On program for local elementary school girls. In addition, she spent a dozen years in the corporate world handling various facets of public relations for International Paper and 20 years owning and operating a small manufacturing business with her husband. In her time at SUNY Plattsburgh, her student projects have helped over 30 local nonprofit organizations. Colleen and her husband Michael have 3 teenage children. And a final thank you to everyone who submitted questions. Public input was significant, which shows people are engaged. We did our best to select a varied sampling of the questions that were submitted. Our moderators will now introduce the candidates and explain the ground rules for tonight's debate. Thank you.
I am Colleen Lemza, and I will welcome our candidates. Mayor Jim Calhoun is our current mayor of the city of Plattsburgh and appears as the Independence ticket nominee and is the Republican Party candidate. Dr. Colin Reed, challenger for the mayor's seat, appears on the Democratic ticket, as well as the working class and women's equality lines on the ballot.
Come on out, guys.
Good evening, gentlemen. Our format is simple. We will start with a 2-minute opening statement, followed by questions to which each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. Our timekeeper is Ms. Gisette Paez, a political science student here at SUNY Plattsburgh. The audience is asked to withhold reactions until the end in order to save time. We will have approximately 90 minutes for this debate.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Julia Overton Healy, and I'm pleased to have this opportunity to acknowledge the employees of SUNY Plattsburgh who helped to make this venue so comfortable for all of us this evening. And I also want to thank the members of Vision to Action, who are sponsors and organizers of tonight's event. Our questions tonight will explore each of the 4 areas of V2A as previously mentioned. And if time permits, we'll also be able to introduce some additional questions which were provided by the citizens of the city of Plattsburgh. We'll begin the debate with each candidate offering a 2-minute personal, not platform, statement, and then we will move into the question phase. I'd like to start with Mayor Calhoun. Please describe your background for the audience. That is, who you are, what you stand for, and why you believe in Plattsburgh. Essentially, sir, what is your story?
Well, my story is I'm a North Country boy. I was born in Chateauguay, came to school here in Plattsburgh, was in business in Plattsburgh for a number of years, never strayed more than 50 miles away, been involved in workforce education and training for 30 years. The public workforce system, rose to be the executive director of the Workforce Investment Board for 4-county area, twice elected to the presidency of our state workforce association. And all of those things were places where leadership was absolutely essential, where we would need to collaborate among people who would be maybe not natural collaborators. And so I've spent my entire career trying to find a way to bring disparate interest into a single focus and to get things done. And so I think that the characterization that I give myself is that I am a man of action. I'm not a man of as many words as I might be. I've in fact been criticized that I don't promote myself enough. But I think that that actions are really much more the indication of who I am. I have been a city councilor for 7 years, been mayor for 3. I think my record stands for itself and has been very visible for folks. And that's really what my campaign's about, and that's really who I am.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dr. Reed, your chance to speak. What's your background? Who are you? What do you stand for? Why do you believe in Plattsburgh? Sir, what's your story?
First of all, thank you all for coming. This is really what democracy is all about. Not only you hearing from us, but us hearing from you in return. And I'm really looking forward to this. I think people in the room know me from a few different places. I know there's some students and faculty out here that might know me from my work on the campus. I teach economics and finance and the School of Business. I was the dean of the business school. It's what brought me here to this region in the first place at a time we really need to build up the business school. I'm very pleased to see it thriving today. When I stepped down from the deanship about half a dozen years ago, I just love this community. A lot of deans will actually go to other schools and take on a position somewhere else, but I was just enthralled by the potential of this community and the excitement in this community, all the things that are possible, so I decided to stay and make this the home for the rest of my life, and I'm very pleased to do it. Others might know me from a column I started writing right before the global financial meltdown that's been so difficult for this community and rural communities in the United States, all across this country. I take on a lot of big issues at the national, but also at the local level. I think about these things constantly, and it seems to me that these challenging times are exactly the time that one would want to put their hat in the ring and run for an office like mayor. It's not fun to do things just in the easy times. It's really fun to do them when there's significant challenges ahead, and that's what I look forward to bringing to it. Others might know me from some of the groups I've been involved with. I did the Vision 2040 forums that eventually formed and spun off into Vision to Action as well. And those Vision 2040 forums, we tried to imagine what this area would look like in the year 2040, so we can then have some control today in trying to get us to that point. Other things I started off as First Weekends, 30 City, Plattsburgh Blues and Jazz series, things that really tried to revitalize this area, because it really does come down to quality of life and doing the things that are going to bring that next generation that will be here in 2040. Thank you.
Thank you.
So throughout tonight's conversation, we will ask candidates to focus on specific plans, not your goals or your dreams or your ideas. We're looking for specifics as much as possible, please. We'll start with the topic of education. Mayor Kalman, we'll start with you first, and then we'll be followed by Dr. Reed. So our first question on the topic of education is, our city school system has been touted as the strongest in our region. Recently, we've experienced an increase in students with higher needs requiring greater resources. So even in light of a shrinking student population, school budgets are strapped. Our city school tax rate is already significantly higher than most surrounding districts, and it's causing concern for the city real estate market. Please share your specific plans to maintain a standout school district without causing alarm for homeowners when it comes to unaffordable tax bills.
Well, I mean, one of the things that's very important about that is, of course, that the school districts are independent organizations that are run by school boards. There was a time when the school district budget had to be approved by the city. That's changed many years ago, and it's approved directly by the voters. So our involvement in directly in the tax rates and tax levies of the school district is very minimal. We have a couple of ways that we can help with that situation, and those are the things that I think we're striving to do. First of all, we have regular communication with the administration about ways that we can try to do business together. If there are certain shared services that we can both benefit from, then we pursue those. We look at ways that we can just make each other's business much more efficient. But more importantly, I think, the thing that the city can do is grow. The city can grow its tax base. The cost of education and the cost of city government is not going to go down dramatically, but if we can build the tax base, if we can get more housing, if we can get more businesses, if we can get more industry within the city limits, then we'll be able to spread that tax burden over a much larger base, and therefore reduce the pro rata share that every person will have to have. That's really going to be our biggest interface, I think, with the city school district, is growing that base. And to do that, of course, we want to attract, I got to stop.
You have 1 minute 30 for an answer.
Oh,
There you go.
thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Reed, same question. Please share your specific plans to maintain a standout school district without causing alarm for homeowners when it comes to unaffordable tax bills.
First of all, our fates are allied. If we use that 2040 year again, the people that are entering schools in just the next decade are the ones that we hope to be around in 2040, as well as other people we hope to attract to this region. But our fates are tied in other reasons as well. First of all, the tax assessment, the tax base that they use for the city school district is the same that the city negotiates with property owners as well. And we need to expand that tax base. Part of it is through growth, obviously, but our population is on a slight decline this decade. We really need to reverse that trend, attract more people to expand that tax base. We need to be very prudent. There's some large corporations that have been given large tax assessment reductions to the tune of 80%, and that becomes very costly when we all of a sudden shed $25 million off the tax rolls. That troubles the city school district just as much as us. And our bond rating, they're going to the same bond markets for funds as well as we are, so we have to be sensitive to our bond rating because it also affects them as well. So we are allied in this, and we should be talking regularly together.
Mr. Aaron Baltic-Schechter suggested this question. In what ways do you see how Clinton Community College and SUNY Plattsburgh enrich our community? And in which ways do you see how these institutions present challenges? And what steps would you take to resolve those challenges?
You know, I think the challenges are actually rather minor. We know some of them, but I think they can be very easily overcome with the greater cooperation between the various institutions. I think we're making some headway. You may know also that I've been a champion of bringing the colleges right into the city center. I helped start Center for Public Service to try to get our faculty and our resources out into the community, because that's a really valuable resource for the community. But the community is also a very valuable resource for the college. I know a lot of the faculty and staff and students on this college are working in the community, but it's also informing their learning as well. Now, I'm obviously a big fan, a big supporter of colleges of all sorts. Clinton Community College is such a treasure. It's a little bit different than our campus at SUNY Plattsburgh, because almost everybody that goes to Clinton Community College are local. Their roots are deep here. They're going to stay here. I might add, it's probably the most beautiful community college anywhere in the country. So we need to consider these as prizes and treasures for our community and work much more closely together. I think that's very easily done.
Thank you. Now, Mayor Calnan, your turn. What are your thoughts on how our local higher education institutions both enrich and challenge the community? And what would you do to resolve those challenges?
Well, first of all, the enrichment part is exactly the most important piece of this. First of all, the population of students and faculty really enrich us through diversity. We get people from around the state, around the world, in fact, who come to Plattsburgh, many of whom come here, fall in love, and stay here. I think that's a really important aspect of what the college brings. It brings a tremendous amount of talent. It brings a tremendous amount of activity and vibrancy. At the same time, there are some challenges that affect the peace and quiet of the neighborhoods. When I first joined the Common Council some years ago, it was a pretty intense problem. Through the good work of my predecessor and President Etling, a number of new means of communication opened up. The city's services were then explained, particularly to off-campus students. Not that we're here to bother you, but to really give you some leverage on keeping your landlord honest and being able to really be sure that you have a good, safe, and effective place to live. And those kinds of conversations continue to this day. We participate in a number of things together, and that has really mitigated the challenges tremendously.
Last education question. Mayor Calmon, education at all levels is critical for a thriving community. With decreasing population in the region, Plattsburgh suffers from what is commonly known as the brain drain. What are your thoughts to make this city and the region more attractive to upwardly mobile families and retain our college graduates?
Well, first of all, it is the quality of life. I mean, everything that we know about millennials is that they are looking first for the place they want to live, and then they'll find the job there that will satisfy their need. And so that's why our development of downtown is such a critical element of attracting and keeping a millennial workplace. So the success that my administration has had in that regard, particularly the most recent $10 million award, is going to pay dividends for us in that regard for many years to come. I think that's an important role for the city to play. We understand that we need to be taking, of course, much better advantage of our natural resources, and we have plans of developing at this point for better use of our river, more effective use of our lake. We want to expand our marina, for example. Just the other day at the Norsk welcoming, one of the gentlemen from Norsk said to me, "We really like your marina. We need to double it because our people are going to want to put boats there, and we need to respond to those kinds of things that will, get more people to come here, get more people to stay here, and to really just add to the vibrancy of Plattsburgh."
Okay, thank you. Dr. Reed, same question. What would you do to build education excellence and therefore attract more upwardly mobile residents to avoid the brain drain?
The brain drain isn't something that only challenges our community. I think a lot of rural communities are experiencing this. And when I talk to grandparents, they often ask me, what can I do to get their grandkids to come back here? And their grandkids understandably go to college some other place, and they want to start their career some other place in a bigger market where they have more opportunities. But it's always a hope of mine that we can figure out a way to get them back here. Now, one of the biggest challenges we actually have, getting back to the property tax issue, is the sticker shock to moving back to our own community, as well as the jobs that we have to create here. But jobs is a little bit more flexible. We can give them good broadband. A lot of jobs by 2040 will be able to be performed from your home, upwards of a third of the jobs available by that time. So that, maybe it'll solve that problem, but the property tax problem is still a big one. If you look at the cost of a median home compared to the cost of or the median household income in the city of Plattsburgh, look at the tax burden, property tax burden works out to 16.23% of their household income. The next closest county in the entire country is about 9%, almost half what our tax burden is here. So if we were a county, the city of Plattsburgh would be the highest property tax county in the world. Now that's sticker shock because we're trying to get this doctor's family or this professor's family or people from Norks to come and live in the city. We have to recognize that we have to control costs and provide those essential services that we need to get them here in the first place. And I'm going to work very hard on doing just that.
Thank you. And we're going to move on to our second theme of the evening, which is arts and culture. Dr. Reed, residents of the city and town of Plattsburgh have rallied behind the renovation and rebirth of the Strand with substantial donations and support. What are your plans for how to leverage this success thus far in order to make Plattsburgh an arts destination for bigger name acts that will draw from a larger geographic region, including possibly competing with Lake Placid and across the lake?
I don't think we have to compete with Lake Placid and across the lake. We've got the resources right here to do it ourselves. The Strand is an incredible facility, world class. I put it against any other theater of its size for any small city anywhere in the country. But it's not really just the Strand, it's an entire community that we need to knit together. And I've been very involved, many of you know I'm not necessarily a blues and jazz fan, but I helped start up Plattsburgh Blues and Jazz Series just for that. We attract some of the best blues and jazz people from everywhere in the country, from Chicago, from New York, from Memphis, from Florida, to come here and play on a regular basis. And then we use the proceeds from this to put on a large festival every summer. My point is there's all kinds of nonprofits that actually want to be knit into that circle. So the Strand can be an element of a really rich cultural mosaic here. Another example I might use through 30 City, we've been sponsoring the mural projects. My goal is to have 20 or 30 murals all across the city. Make us known for our blues, our jazz, our murals, our beautiful theater. These are things that the millennials want. These are things that's going to attract them here, and these are things that are going to put us on this small city map. My goal is to make Plattsburgh the small city blues capital of the country, and I think it's attainable.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Calnon, your chance. What are your plans for making Plattsburgh a big name destination for the arts?
I want to latch onto that word compete too. One of the things that we did in developing some of the relationships with the Strand as well as the relationships with our marina is we went to Burlington and we spoke to the folks that were there. And the folks at the Strand in Burlington, or the Flynn Theater in Burlington, don't view the Strand as competition. They view it as another venue that they can cooperate with. And having big friends is a very good way to expand your own capabilities. And that's one of the things that I think we need to do to be very successful, is to be sure that as we grow, we don't necessarily want to be a smaller version of Burlington, but we want to be able to take advantage of having that brother out there that's going to help us, much like we do with Montreal and with all the other attractions that are around us. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to partner. We need to partner with anyone that has similar interests with us, and we need to do so. The other thing that we can do in a much more localized sense, and was part of the application that resulted in the $10 million award, is that one of the things that we want to do, it's not just about exhibit space, it's also about maker space. It's also about places where artists who don't have a studio of their own, or don't have a place where they can actually produce goods, can have a place to start. They can establish a business there. And that needs to be a key element, I think, in how we develop downtown, so that we not only celebrate the arts and we not only use them to our advantage, we also greatly enhance the ability for them to grow.
Thank you. Arts question number 2, we're going to start with the mayor this time. The arts are more than visual, they are also cultural. Recently, Plattsburgh has seen an emphasis on cultural arts through the Tibetan Arts Festival. Other than the Strand, what ideas do you have for embedding culture and arts into the daily life of the citizens of Plattsburgh, and not just as a form of entertainment? For example, how can the arts be positioned as an economic driver?
Well, I think in a lot of different ways. One of the things, and Colin mentioned the outdoor art, not something that I had any role in creating. A big fan. I think it's a great idea, and I think that those kinds of efforts are extremely important. I believe what my role has been in that is that we've created an atmosphere where people believe that they can do things, where they really think the conversation has changed. Now, when we start to look at more cultural things, another initiative that I am involved with is celebrating our French-Canadian history, our French-Canadian language connections, involved with an international organization that is trying to promote those kinds of things. And as we look at the events that are rolling out of our events and promotions coordinator, things like we had an Irish Fest, we need to have a French Fest, and we need to celebrate all aspects of our community. We need to help grow some of the events that are currently on campus into the mainstream of the city of Plattsburgh, where we can celebrate, again, the diversity that the college brings to us. So I think those are the kinds of things that our activities just ought to be much more about arts and culture, and it's not all about fireworks and bands. It sometimes is about just getting to know the ins and outs of a particular culture.
Thank you. Dr. Reed, what ideas do you have for developing the arts as culture and as an economic driver for this area?
You'd mentioned in your preamble the Tibetan Festival, which I had a little bit to do with, and we've actually got even bigger plans for that in the future. This may sound a little bit far-fetched, but we think that it's realizable to actually have the Dalai Lama come to Plattsburgh as part of the trip to Montreal as well. There's various connections with the Thai restaurant in town, which are incredibly exciting. Imagine that. But just tie that a little bit back to the education theme, because this isn't just simply culture to attract tourists, although that's wonderful in itself. This is culture to educate the community in the value of culture and arts. And if we could be the ambassadors for these arts, that'll be infectious on the tourists as well. It's not just murals, it's not just the Strand Theater or Plattsburgh Blues and Jazz, it's really what's in the 6 inches between your ears is that attitude of appreciating quality of life. So we need to build upon that appreciation. And I think the millennials have a really big role to play in this because they really get it. They understand quality of life. They almost insist upon it. They want to have that kind of enrichment. And we don't, as government, need to do it for them. As a matter of fact, we just need to kind of get out of the way and let them do it. There's all kinds of nonprofit groups that are going to step up to the plate. Our job is to create the atmosphere for them to succeed and remove every possible obstacle for them to succeed. And I'll certainly want to do that.
Okay. Our third arts question, we're going to start with the mayor. In many communities across the country, and in fact, Burlington across the lake is a great example, arts and culture are linked to environmentalism and green communities. Do you believe that this is something that could happen more firmly here in Plattsburgh? And if so, what specifically would you do to make that happen? Or if not, why not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, as we look at the greatest resources we have are our natural resources. Cities are formed on water. In many cases, lake and river are both tremendous assets for us. We need to protect them very much so. We need to really look at our energy usage. And one of the nice things about living in Plattsburgh is 96% of our power is renewable. It's hydropower. But it's hydropower from the other side of the state. It relies on a grid. We need to take a real hard look at how are we using that and how can we better use it. Our municipal lighting department has energy saving programs that we've been utilizing. I'd like to take them to the next level. I really want to accelerate them so it's more than just a home installation program or a Energy Star appliance rebate. I really want to get into things like really getting people to rethink how they heat their homes. Let's find 4 homes that are close together that have electric boilers, and let's replace them with one geothermal pump. Let's find ways to incentivize those things. Let's find ways that we can, all of our growth must be green growth. And that's why, again, I'm going to go back to our application for the downtown revitalization. Some of the images that we presented in that, we're really trying to bring that message across. Rooftop gardens, things like that, just so that people will be thinking about these things as possible. I think it's absolutely critical for our sustainability here as the city.
Thank you. Dr. Reed, your chance now. How would you connect arts with environmentalism?
To me, environmentalism means sustainability, using the resources we have available to us wisely and carefully. One rather token thing I'd like to do right off the bat is have a big green sign at all of our entrances to the city saying you are driving into a green, sustainable city, because after all, most of the energy we consume within the city is sustainable. We should really be touting that as a feature because I think that appeals to those individuals we're trying to attract here. That's a value that's important to them. The other aspect is using our resources wisely. We've got a lot of treasures in the city of Plattsburgh that I'd like to see us capitalize on more effectively. Our history, our hidden spaces. Some of you may have been at the opening just the other day of the most recent mural we did in what we call a hidden space, an area in behind the Co-op, Iris's restaurant, and the Champlain Wine Company. We would like to make hidden spaces all across the city of those sorts that people can enjoy. And that mural is absolutely beautiful. It has that theme of sustainability. It's an agricultural motif, fits in absolutely perfectly in this environment. So we are a green community. I just don't think we realize it sometimes. We need to be shouting that from the mountaintops because we share that value.
Thank you both.
Now we'll move on to transportation questions, starting with you, Dr. Reed. Question number 1 on transportation. Transportation is essential to maintaining employment and driving an economy. What plans do you have to improve transportation? We mean all forms of transportation, driving, biking, pedestrian, to support employment for people in the city.
This raises actually some infrastructure questions. Obviously, in this reality, roads are going to be an important dimension of transportation for many decades to come. We need to make sure we maintain our roads properly. That means that we're going to have to accelerate road repair because if we let these roads go too far, we've only been rebuilding about 0.8 miles of roads a year out of a 65-mile network. That's rotation, about 70 to 75 years per road. A road only lasts for about 20 years. If we don't maintain it in a more consistent, systematic basis, the cost of rebuilding is a lot more expensive than the cost of simply regrinding and repaving.
Our city's aging infrastructure is slated to cause significant expense as we're now forced to make repairs in older parts of the city and areas that were once the former airbase. How do you plan to pay for these repairs? And furthermore, what's your plan to map out a preventive maintenance plan so the city isn't repairing pipes and roads repeatedly in crisis mode?
Well, given our weather and our climate in general, we're always going to be repairing roads and pipes. That is what happens here. Water will create shifts in pavement, will create shifts in soils. Those kinds of breaks will happen. We try to prioritize which roads we do and what infrastructure below it we do based on our knowledge of the age of the pipes. Perfect example is, of course, the pipes that were left over from the Air Force Base. We have known for a number of years that they were reaching the end of their useful life. We were rather suddenly surprised by how rapid that was. Our plan is to seek a great deal of federal assistance in fixing that. We estimated it would take about $6 million to replace all of the pipe, all of the ACV pipe that's at the base. We are applying for a grant which should go out this week to a federal agency for half of that, $3 million. So all of a sudden we've cut that cost in half. We're going to pursue other funding sources, and then we're going to prioritize it because the grant could be spent over the next 5 years. There are some portions of the pipe which we've already had tested, so we know exactly what we're talking about now, that need to be replaced next year. There are some that will last several years, and we can spread out that redevelopment as we go. It's critically important that we get other people's money to help us with this stuff, because obviously $6 million is a tremendous amount of money to put on 20,000 people all at once.
Thank you. And Dr. Reed, how do you plan to pay for infrastructure repairs and preventive maintenance?
The infrastructure repairs on the new base that we were just discussing are, let's not hope that we can get these grants. Let's start doing something right away. We keep our fingers crossed that that money will be forthcoming, but these individuals were gambling with their safety and health. They may go for days and days without water, and imagine yourself trying to go for days and days without water, or the dangers that result when water mains break. We need to take care of this problem. If we can do it in phases, take a little bit of the worst right now, hope that we get the grants, but by any means, we have to do something about it. When we took over those properties back in 2001, we were told at that time that failing infrastructure was ready to go pretty soon. These were, at that time, 50-year-old asbestos concrete pipes with a lifespan of about 50 years. So we knew that there was that problem there. Since 2001, they've actually paid about $7.5 million in city taxes and about $20 million in total taxes. So they rightfully say, with some indignation, why aren't you worrying about the pipes? You've obviously got the revenue from us to take care of this problem many times over, actually. So we need to, if we do it in phases, we need to start and give them some sort of assurance that we're on this. We're not simply waiting for a grant, because they look at it very differently. There's been more breaks in the new base in the last 2 years than the previous decade combined. This is reaching tragic proportions. I don't want it to go another day.
Okay, back to me now, gentlemen. Our final theme topic for the evening is recreation. Mayor Calnon, what specific plans can you offer that address the development of City Beach, which will not only improve recreation in the city, but could also make a positive economic impact as well? How will you balance these plans against the interests of those who would prefer to not see City Beach further developed?
Well, I think that development of the beach is really could take two approaches. Develop could mean very commercial development, totally against it. Develop in terms of environmentally appropriate recreational facilities, I think I'm very much in favor of. We've been in discussion with someone who wants to build an adventure course and a zip line. We have been improving the buildings that are there. We have plans to continue to do that. The next step for the beach, I believe, will be redoing the bathhouse that's closest to the state beach. It has the potential to be much more than a bathhouse. I think we'd like to see a full-scale restaurant put there. There's a possibility of having it become a great venue for events, weddings, those kinds of things. I think that's a very appropriate next step. We've already done a number of visioning efforts that have supported that. And again, we're looking at ways that we can finance that, not 100% on the back of the city taxpayers. And so I think we're going to continue those kinds of things. But we also need to include, some other repairs there. We're going to be adding mats along the sand so that folks with disabilities can actually get to the water. We're looking at trying to find ways to be sure that the parking lot is more accessible to anyone, a person of any ability. We're really trying to make this a much bigger deal. And we're actually having some conversations about a way that we could make it so that nobody from Clinton County would have to pay to come into the beach, because we think it's a great regional resource.
Thank you. Dr. Reed, same question. What ideas do you have about city beach development?
I think the beach is a treasure. You probably heard the statistic that it's the longest beach, freshwater beach in the eastern United States. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to do something. If people say that we ought not use the beach in those ways, I think part of it is location. I don't think there'd be any doubt that we should use the beach if it happened to be just right downtown. But maybe there's something we could do about that. If we own the rights to the water between downtown and the beach, it's about 1.5 miles. The cost of constructing a boardwalk from the downtown to the beaches for that length is somewhere around $5 million. It's an awful lot of money, but in some sort of public-private partnership, I think that'd be a wonderful opportunity, because it's not so much whether the beach is good or not, it's whether it's accessible or not. The second thing that we brought up, the mayor mentioned that he'd like to have a pass for everybody in Clinton County to enjoy that beach, because that's a Clinton County resource, not just a city resource. So we should be looking to partner with other entities, other governments to help us do this. But I don't think we can wait for city government to eventually have the funds to do this in the way that I think can really live up to its potential. I believe it needs to be a public-private partnership. I believe there's many entities that have vision for this, are willing to move relatively quickly on this. Let's talk with them about the possibility of this. Let's do this together, because I'd rather do this together than not be able to do it alone for way too long.
Okay, thank you. Question number 2, we're going to start with Dr. Reed. Plattsburgh has an underused and underdeveloped waterfront, particularly near our riverfront area downtown. Previous administrations have gone to significant effort to develop the area, coming close to bringing development plans to reality, but falling short. Knowing that there will be a marina, what plans do you have that will capitalize on the development that has already been done? And how will you make those plans a reality when others have tried and failed?
When the announcement for the DRI came public back in early May, I remember that I think it was WPTZ did a survey of their readers and listeners and asked how you would like to see the $10 million spent. And the single biggest, the majority of people said, let's have better access to our waterfront, because after all, we're the lake city. But if you think of when Plattsburgh really developed, in that era, we used the water as our trash way. We turned our back to the water and we looked instead towards the mountain. We need to start turning around, looking at the water as a resource and giving access to it. I was looking at some old maps of Plattsburgh from 100 years ago, and the walk, about 6-block walk from Dock Street to the center city was full of shops. Now it's relatively abandoned. Let's revitalize that corridor so we give a reason for people to go downtown. Or down to the water. I talk about a little bit of a triangle. Let's not move city centers from one place to another. Let's create more centers and have them connected. For instance, imagine if we did something with the waterfront that got people access around, for instance, the sewage treatment plant, which we all recognize isn't going to go anywhere very soon, but there are things we can do to contain odors. There's parks that are built above sewage treatment plants. The most popular park in Manhattan is built right over a sewage treatment plant. That could give us access. Then we have a footbridge going to Trinity Park, and we could do something along Dock and Bridge Street going up to the Strand. And then we could even have better access to the old base. So let's think of different spokes rather than one hub, and I think that's what I would do with the water.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Callanan, what plans do you have that you'd like to share that will build on the waterfront development, and how would you make that happen?
I'm a big fan of small successes versus large failures. I think the problem with the waterfront at this point was that the plan was too ambitious to be accomplished all at once. And much like the marina, for example. We have plans for 94 slips that we drew up a few years ago, but we only put in 32 because we proved their success. It's time now to expand that up towards that 94 slips because it's been a success. It's paying for itself, therefore it's not a burden on the taxpayers, and yet it's providing a benefit to local businesses. Small successes will get us there. So rather than try to build a hotel, a conference center, and a restaurant as was conceived a few years ago. Let's build one. Let's pick something. Let's maybe make it a conference center or with restaurant capabilities. And if someone wants to use it for a conference center and someone wants to put a restaurant in it or just come in and cater from time to time, that's a small success. You start to build that, suddenly there'll be a demand for perhaps a museum, a lake museum. You know, the Lake Champlain Museum is actually interested in having a presence on this side of the lake. What a great spot for that. That's step number 2. Step number 3 might be a classroom for boaters, for the sailing clubs, a place for people to store their equipment over the winter. And all of a sudden, step 4, step 5, maybe that is a hotel. Maybe that is something else. And that's the way that you build without overburdening your tax base, without taking too big a risk and get yourself into trouble. Build on success. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years.
Thank you. Our third recreation question, we're going to start with Mayor Calnon again. This question was suggested by citizen Richard Walker. Plattsburgh has several city parks and other spaces for recreation, and yet some of them are rather run down and harken back to the 1980s. What ideas would you have to improve our public recreational spaces?
Well, quite a few ideas, actually. We've been going through them in a fairly systematic method. We're looking at, of course, safety first, making sure that we've been repairing fences where we can. We've actually been removing some where they present a danger. We've been looking at making sure that if they have bathrooms and other facilities that we upgrade those. We need to continue to do that. And then I think that the next thing, and the thing that we'll be doing more of in the next 12 months, is that we need to make them much more accessible. That's one of the things that we've taken on. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed 25 years ago. We have failed miserably in how we have responded to that. That ends this year. We're in the midst of an assessment right now, and our parks are going to be part of what we're going to be looking at. It really is about making sure that we have facilities that are modern, that are well kept, and are available to all. An example is the replica of the Saratoga that we're going to have built at the beach. Again, at no cost to the city taxpayers. And it was designed to be built for about $45,000, and we said, no, it has to be handicapped accessible. So now it's $75,000. But we don't care, because it's about being a place that is welcoming to everybody. And that's really the thing that's great about Plattsburgh. Because we have a college, because we had an air base, because we have the transient population coming and going on a great transportation corridor, we're a very welcoming community, and we need to put that foot forward.
Thank you. Dr. Reed, how would you reply to the question of what can be done to improve public recreational space?
You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm concerned about the level of taxes already, so I don't think we can simply afford to do more by expanding the taxes coming in the first place. But I think what we can do is reorient some of our spending. For instance, if we develop the marina as a public-private partnership rather than essentially a public marina, well, it's a city marina, but it's not a marina really for the city, it's for other entities. And maybe we could partner with another entity, another company to manage that. Same perhaps with aspects of the beaches I alluded to earlier, or with Crate Center or the gym, and free some of those funds up, because when I'm knocking on doors and going from neighborhood to neighborhood, they ask about the activities in the park. They tell me at one time these parks were populated with roving sets of recreational leaders that would go from park to park to park in the summer and entertain the kids and teach them basketball and teach them play baseball with them, etc. We've lost those programs. The parks, many people say, are now under-maintained. They don't even want their children to be going into them. They become a haven for drug use as well, which is a problem we'll probably talk about a little bit later as well. And as a consequence, I think we need to reorient our priorities, get people back into the existing 18 parks in the city rather than putting too much of our public resources into areas where I really think we can effectively do public-private partnerships. So it's really an allocation issue, not a funding issue in my mind.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. We have some additional questions that fall outside the 4 areas of vision to action, but believe that they're valuable for our residents to make an informed decision. So question number 1, first to Mayor Calnon. We're aware that our North Country Chamber of Commerce is very active in building strong alliances with various employers within the city, such as Georgia Pacific, Moldrite, CVPH, and SUNY Plattsburgh. What would you champion in addition to what the Chamber already does?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we reinstated the Community Development Office. And clearly, despite some of the letters that have been in the paper of late, something that all 7 of us that were elected in 2013 believed in, that we really need to reestablish our Community Development Office so that we could interact with more businesses, so that we would be able to help support the activities of the Chamber, and really be sure that we're providing the kind of support that will help the businesses that are already here while we continue to look for additional businesses to locate. I also think that we spend a tremendous amount of our attention in looking at how does the development in the city benefit the general economic development of the region. And of course, having an authentic downtown with the great history that we have, the culture and arts and all the things that we've been talking about here tonight, services, and those kinds of things are one of our big roles in the overall economic development of the area. So I think that we really can support that economic development growth in both of those ways, and that perhaps our most important role is in our partnerships with the town, with the Chamber, with the Development Corporation, and other agencies that are out there working on economic development.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Reed, any comment from you about the question, how to build stronger alliances with those local businesses and employers?
The large local business employers, and the ones we hope to come someday. I think we're already building some of those alliances. I live for economic development. You know, that's what I do. This is such an exciting opportunity to be able to potentially do more of that. But I've been doing it for a number of years already with the Chamber. When the Chamber is looking to have an economic study done to track that $500 million we recently applied for, they came to me to help run some of the numbers, which I obviously do pro bono over and over and over again. I came up with a number of 8,000 families, households, in the Regional Economic Development Council to just maintain our population as it is now going towards 2040. And that's where I recalculated the 3,000 households we would need for this region. This is fascinating stuff. The opportunity to work with somebody as talented as the community development leader in the city of Plattsburgh right now is a great opportunity. I would bring that office even closer to the mayor's office. I'd work incredibly closely with that office to exercise every single possibility that's possibly out there. You know, at one time, 50% of our economy was manufacturing, and that's the time when it made a lot of sense to attract a Georgia Pacific into a city. Nowadays, only 20% of our nation's GDP is manufacturing, and realistically, they're not going to come to a city of our sort anymore. What we can do, though, is attract the workers that may end up working in that enterprise in the town, and that gets back to then quality of life. Quality of life is an economic development variable now.
Okay, thank you. Question number 2 in this section has to do with housing. Dr. Reed, we'll start with you first. The fastest growing segment of our population is our senior citizens. While having made strides, senior housing, both independent and assisted, is a considerable concern for our local seniors. Do you have any specific plans to solve this concern? Oh, Dr. Reed, sorry.
First of all, a hidden asset in our community is the Plattsburgh Housing Authority. They do an awful lot of this. They've got an excellent leader, Mark Hamilton, that really understands this. We've also got some champions in Jeremiah Ward and other regional economic developers in the city that understand the importance of housing, because after all, if you can't house people that we hope to attract, you're not going to attract them. And we also, it's just as important to keep somebody here, a retiree here, rather than having them retire in Florida and create that vacancy as attracting somebody in to fill their spot. But they tell me that they're on fixed income, and yet the various costs of living, including property tax, are rising, and they're getting pinched. So it's understandable they need to retire somewhere else. But I'd like to arrest that. I'd like to figure out ways to keep them here as well as attract others. And that requires affordable housing. I mentioned earlier that the median cost of housing in this city is actually pretty high for a city with our income level, $147,000. So we need to have more affordable alternatives. We also recognize there's a lot of dilapidated homes that we need to recover, put back on the tax base, maybe work with local contractors to bring them up to snuff to move young families into these, we call them zombie properties. A number of Grants are available. Malone, Ticonderoga, Saranac Lake all received these state grants to attract those funds. The city has some modest grants that will help with that transition as well. We need to be doing much more of that if we're going to solve the housing problem, because if we can't house them, we can't attract them. And there really is a high quality housing shortage in the city of Plattsburgh.
Now it's your turn, sorry.
One of the things I think is missing in tonight's conversation is rebuttals. I think I have a number of points here that I, at some point, want to get back to. And one of them is what was just mentioned about zombie properties. The grants that were given to help prevent zombie properties. They weren't here to, the grant was not for remediation of zombie properties, which is why we didn't apply. The zombie properties we have are predominantly the result of fires. That's not what this money is designed for. So we are involved with the Plattsburgh Housing Authority. We are collaborating with them on a plan by which they will be able to buy properties and be able to rehabilitate them with the help of some of the businesses in the area, including some of the banks, and then put them back on the market for folks of modest income. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we do. We do have grants, and we're applying for more grants that are helping homeowners, low-income homeowners, renovate their homes so that they're more energy efficient, they are more affordable, so that they can actually build their wealth in their own homes. We're already involved in all of those kinds of things, and we're going to continue to do them. We supported, not with direct grant, but with loans, the expansion of affordable housing at Catherine Gardner's. We gave them a construction loan so that they could proceed with the construction straight through, get it done, bill for reimbursement. We continue to do that. We support housing of all kinds in the city, outside the city, and one of the things that was, again, in our downtown revitalization application was the statement that we need to build housing for all income levels as a part of any development of housing that comes through DRI.
Okay, Mayor Calman, this one begins with you. We've alluded to how beautiful the city of Plattsburgh is. We're located in a gorgeous geographic area. And while most of the city looks good, people and property owners make effort to keep things in good repair and looking nice, there are some areas which suggest that we don't have a lot of pride in our community. What ideas might you have to encourage more pride of place in Plattsburgh?
Well, I think that one of the things that we have to be very aware of is the limited amount of authority that we have to enter private property. This is something that comes up quite frequently. Why can't you just take this property and do something with it? Well, because it will cost the taxpayers a couple $100,000 to remediate perhaps the asbestos that's in the building. And without help, I'm not sure that that's something that we should do. We shouldn't do that and let a private developer get away with having a property that they should have taken care of in the first place. We can't tell you what color to paint your house. We can't, if your building is secure and it doesn't present a safety hazard, we're prohibited from doing too much. Now, what we can do is we can offer incentives. And that's what we're doing. That's why I mentioned the grant for low-income housing. We're offering people an incentive to actually fix their homes up. It's not just about energy efficiency. It's also about cosmetics. It's also about having a better looking place to go. We do need to expand those activities. We need to go neighborhood by neighborhood and go after the most egregious examples. Because what happens is, and we've seen it happen everywhere in this city and in cities across the country, when you start to fix up one or two places, all the ones around them rise to the challenge. So it really is about providing the kinds of incentives that we can to prompt the public-private partnership. Now, it's a little bit different public-private partnership than we've been talking about so far tonight. It's individual people and the public getting together to improve their own properties.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Reed, what would you like to say about pride of place?
Now, this is hard work, but I think if we work harder, we can actually make some headway. There's a recent conference of a number of mayors of small cities from all around the country where they took this very problem, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. This is happening in rural areas all across the country. And I read from that 21 mayors stated what they were doing in their communities very successful, including the mayor from Burlington just across the way. There's really novel ideas of how we rehabilitate. And sure, there's challenges, but there's also opportunities. You know, a lot of people as I go door to door will talk about code enforcement. It's something that people feel very passionately about, because each one of them has one of these properties in their neighborhood that they wish there's a little bit more attention devoted to them. At one time, the code enforcement office was underneath the fire chief because the fire chief has a legitimate concern in preventing fires at buildings. So there's things we could perhaps do internally to become more proactive rather than reactive with these sorts of issues. But it's just not code enforcement. It's providing the incentives for people to do the right thing, sometimes even providing the disincentives for them to do the wrong thing. But it really requires a concerted approach, and we need to, and it's going to be hard work. But we need to, because if we can't revitalize and give a sense of neighborhood and community to these neighborhoods, if we don't show pride in them, how could we expect them to show pride in themselves? So we need to really step up to the plate, and I think we can do it.
Okay, thank you. Our last question has to do with City Council. Dr. Reed, in your opinion, what is the true role of City Council?
You know, this has been coming an awful lot because I don't think there's a forum that Mayor Callan and I go to where they don't ask about the city manager, for instance. City council are your elected officials. They're the people that you're going to approach if you have a problem. And the mayor, I believe, is in some sense the chairman of that board, feeding them the information, digesting things for them, doing the homework with them, educating them, reaching consensus. So I think those 6 councillors with the facilitator of the mayor, who actually, by the way, doesn't have a vote unless it's a tie, that relationship is really important. I would like to enable, to engage, to raise the bar for our councillors even higher and really work together very effectively for them. I'd be worried a little bit if we hire somebody else to do all that work for us, because I think it's important for us as the elected officials to be really actively engaged in this. And that's why Jim and I actually feel very similarly about the city manager position. We believe that we have that expertise there. It's just a matter of really tapping into it, working more on engagement, education of the public, drawing the public much more into the process. And that's so easy nowadays. We can have two-way conversations via the internet for those shut-ins. We can have many more meetings publicized and broadcast, webcast two-way over the internet. We can have many more citizens' commissions for budget, for parks, for roads, for infrastructure, et cetera, and that's what I would like to do.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor Calnan, from your perspective, what's the City Council's role?
Well, City Council really has 2 primary roles as assigned to them by the city charter, and it's been that way since the city was formed. First and foremost is budget. The mayor gets to propose a budget, the mayor gets to administer the resulting budget, but the councilors are the only ones who get to vote on the budget. I don't even get a vote on the budget if it's a tie. That is strictly the council's budget in the end. Unless they choose not to amend the mayor's budget, then the mayor's budget would continue. But I don't know that that's ever happened in the city's history. And so that's a really important role. And then, like any other board of directors, they have a really strong policy role. It is their responsibility to set policies for the city, to really communicate to the people, to the employees, what they expect from their city government. Now, that's not day-to-day administration. That's big picture stuff. That's the kind of things, much like smart streets, for example. We really should adopt that. We probably will one of these days. There are some wrinkles that make it a little bit difficult to do right now, but we'll overcome them in time. And I think that that's a really important role. And in the old language charter, there was a thing that was in there that nobody kind of scratched their heads. They were called fence watchers. And we weren't quite sure what that meant. Did they, peek over fences? But they actually, what they meant was if there was a dispute between 2 neighbors about the fence line, in those days, the councilors actually were the ones who arbitrated that and decided what to do with the fence. The councilors fulfill that role on a daily basis. They are the people's entree to the city government. So they get the phone calls first, and they champion the things that their people want. So those 3 roles are what I think the city council is really all about.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Reed, you alluded to this question a little bit earlier. In the last several years, the drug epidemic has reached staggering new highs, with increasingly more dangerous substances drawing a population to our city, which goes against the very type of community Vision to Action is trying to create. With city and local resources struggling, how do you plan to fight the mounting drug culture to tell those from that population that drugs are not a Plattsburgh value?
With harm mitigation, with a rehabilitation, and we have not nearly enough beds for this, and then also with interdiction. And you know, the police understand that. They realize it's just not a crime problem. We need more extensive approach. And we do that by removing the stigma of this, recognizing this is a health problem, not a crime problem.
Thank you. Mayor Calnan, could you please share your thoughts about responding to our increased drug culture?
Yeah, I think that the statistics will show that the problem has really mushroomed greatly in the last 4 years. And initially, I think our police reaction was that this is a crime, and dealing drugs is a crime that we will still very much enforce very vigorously. But over the course of my administration, we've had many conversations about the role of police and the training of the policemen to recognize that this is in fact a disease, and that the best use of an arrest is to convince somebody it's time for rehab. They may not be quite there themselves. They may want to go, but we learned an awful lot of things about what drugs will do to your brains. And they're really of two minds. I know I shouldn't be thinking this, but I know where I can get drugs tonight. I've heard that said. And that's because their brain chemistry has changed. So we use our police force to really try to get people to help themselves. The best way that we can help solve this problem is, of course, to get rid of the demand. We need to celebrate recovery was the phrase that was used in the Strand. That's an absolutely marvelous way to put it. Celebrate recovery. Make sure that there is no more stigma to being addicted. And as employers, it is incumbent on us not to fire people just because they have this disease. We need to try to support them, because look at it, if they're desperate now, they're desperate for a drug, and they no longer have a job, and they no longer have health insurance, they're going to be committing crimes to feed their habit. And it is really incumbent on us to make sure that we help our people get healthy.
Thank you. So, Mayor Calhoun, you asked for a moment to have a chance to rebut or revisit. So I would like to give each of you 2 minutes to do exactly that. Pick a topic, pick an idea, pick a key point you'd like to revisit or rebut. And we will start with Mayor Calhoun.
Well, I think one of the things that I'd like to say is, my opponent is a very prolific writer, written books or written columns. Obviously, as a lecturer here at the college, really is very good with words. Mark Twain said, of course, that action speaks louder than words, but not nearly as often. And I think that's an important thing to think about. I'm about action. I've been criticized for not touting my own worth enough. I'm talking about the actions that are out there. I really like to celebrate accomplishments, not ideas. I like to have something to show for it. And so when I look at some of the things that my opponent has said tonight, they're a little interesting. He compared us, the city's tax rate to a county tax rate. Well, that's an unfair comparison. Counties don't have the level of fire and police protection that we do. We could compare ourselves to other cities. Jamestown, for example, a city here in New York State, has 220% higher tax than we do. We're at just under $11 a thousand. They're at 24. So those are better comparisons. So I really think you've got to really take a look at some of the things that Collins says, and really understand that there's something else there. There's some fact checking that needs to be done. Taxes don't pay for pipes, so it doesn't matter how much you've paid in taxes. Taxes go for police and fire and the rest of the city services and public works and those kinds of things. Water rents pay for pipes. So quoting the number of taxes that are out there is not a way of saying that we should have fixed these pipes years ago. It's that kind of stuff that kind of are muddling the waters here. I mean, we really need to stick to facts, actual facts, and not, I guess, implication. And I think that's really kind of what separates our campaigns at this point. I'm just about facts, I'm just about actions, and I'm not about words.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Reed, your chance for 2 minutes to revisit or rebut a key point that you would like to make.
You know, I think I'm also about actions. Many of you have seen some of the accomplishments and things that I've tried to do in the city and in the downtown core, for instance. But words are actually important. It's important for the public to come along with us because we're all in this together. We face some significant challenges as a city. We're not alone in them, but we do face those challenges. And I think the way we overcome them is to keep our citizens and our voters incredibly well informed. I would like to, as mayor, as a matter of fact, report to you every week in a column or some other forum the progress we're making, the challenges we're facing. I want to include the public in every meeting we conduct that's possible to do so. This really needs to be a two-way street. We can't expect 7 people in a room to have all the answers. We really need you all to be engaged in the process. But I am about words. Maybe I'm also about equations. I do like this kind of stuff, but I'm also about pictures. And one of the things I'm most concerned about is the financial picture for the city right now. We've had a string of 5 budget deficits, if you include the mayor's proposed budget deficit for next year, which we hope the council will trim down. But if they don't, there'll be 5 budget deficits in a row, and that's completely eroded a fund balance that was $6.8 million back in 2013. We need to solve these problems, because when we have no fund balance left, when we run strings and strings and strings of deficits, eventually it hits. And now we're finding it's going to impinge on higher taxes, and you already know how I feel about higher taxes. So numbers actually are very important. The fiscal picture is in more dire situation now than, according to a couple of mayors I've spoken to, than they've ever seen in the history of Plattsburgh. This is a situation that challenges not just us, but other cities as well, as I've mentioned. But if we identify, if we put that right out there, if we ask for people's support and people's ideas, I think we can actually solve it together. The public needs to know this stuff, and I think words and education are an important element of that.
Thank you. So if you'll indulge me with a little bit of commentary, I would say that both of you have a deep love and respect for our community. Our final question to both of you, and you will each have 3 minutes for your response. Dr. Reed, we'll let you begin. What would you consider to be your best accomplishment in service to our beloved city? And what also would you consider to be your biggest disappointment in your work on behalf of the city?
Let's begin with disappointments, because I don't think there are all that many that aren't very easily solvable. I've found some obstacles in trying to get some things done. For instance, I received a county grant to put historical signs up around the downtown. And I worked with a local historical society to identify the 50 projects we'd like to do. And I thought that would be a real big driver, but there were obstacles that prevented us from doing that. We had the money in place, we had the designs, we had the French and English translation, everything was in place, but we weren't able to do that. I think that's relatively easy to fix, though. We don't need to have those obstacles. So I think it's really just an attitude of looking at our city with some new, fresh eyes, very much like the eyes of those individuals that may come to work at Norsk very shortly. I would like to see them live in our city. So what I think we can really accomplish is a sense of vibrancy and excitement about our downtown. I think my work through the Downtown Association as its president, or 30 City, or First Weekends, or the Plattsburgh Blues and Jazz series, etc. That's really, it might be relatively small and figurative, but it's important because it's cultural. It's going to take us a little while to acculturate our city to appreciate these sorts of things. And a lot of these millennials that we hope to attract here are going to be the vehicles to do so. Now, it's not fair for us to compare ourselves to Burlington, but I will in this case. You know, in Burlington's case, they attracted a lot of young, vibrant households 20 or 30 years ago to staff, first of all, the GE and the IBM plant. And that really revitalized the attitude of Burlington. It's the attitude that allowed them to take off. Sometimes, and you've been reading in my articles for years now, sometimes we have that kind of woe is me attitude here, but I've always tried to emphasize the excitement that's possible here. I'm a little bit more skeptical and less optimistic about things at the national level at times, but the local level I've always been a champion. I think that's really what the mayor does. Part of the mayor's job is obviously as a bureaucrat to make sure that the streets are kept clean and safe and those sorts of aspects. But the mayor's job is also being a cheerleader. As a matter of fact, the cheerleader job, I think, adds probably another 40 hours to the week. That individual has to be the ambassador for the city. That individual has to be the person that is patting people on the back and saying, yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know if it'll work, but let's try it. Let's have government kind of get out of the way and let the private and the nonprofit sector work, and let's have the mayor partner with that. Let's have the mayor walking up and down the streets and meeting with people. Let's have the mayor rolled out at every opportunity to say just what a wonderful community this is, because I think, and we've seen this in the past, I think that becomes highly infectious. So I think that would be probably the hardest part of the job, but I actually think it's actually going to be the most fun part of the job, and I think it's going to show the greatest dividends for the city.
Thank you. Mayor Callanan, you have the final word this evening. What would you consider to be your biggest achievements in service to the city and also your biggest disappointments?
I would say my biggest achievement was changing the tone, changing the conversation. For some internal reasons and for the global recession that we talked about, the huge collapse that hit us in 2008, we had hunkered down. The city was within itself. There was a lot of the can't-do attitude that was there. I think my greatest achievement is that I said that can't stand. We can't have that. We've got to get out of ourselves. We've got to get out of our funk. We've got to start to do something to really spark everyone's enthusiasm. That created a new relationship with the town of Plattsburgh. Both Supervisor Bassett and Supervisor Cashman and I working closely together. One of the people that I turn to most of the time for advice is Michael Cashman. Looking at becoming an active member of the Regional Economic Development Council, understanding the kind of economic development that's going on across the entire top of the state, understanding the similarities of Potsdam and Canton and Watertown to Plattsburgh, and how we can work together and how we can make plans together. So that Mayor Butler and I are having conversations about how his union negotiations are going and how mine are. I think his are worse. I hope. And those are the kinds of things, so we get out of ourselves and we see the big world. You know, as I mentioned earlier, being involved in an international celebration of French culture and history brings us new friends. Having lunch with the mayor of Quebec City, getting to talk to him about the United States and Plattsburgh itself and come and visit. He hasn't yet, but I know he will. Those are great things. We really change the attitude. And when the attitude changes, then everything's possible. And when everything's possible, people just start to do stuff. The atmosphere is that we are a can-do city, that we're a place where something's going to happen. And those are the kinds of things that are infectious. Now, they're really well timed with the economic news that's been around. You know, over the last couple of years, we've been noted as a great place for millennials, a great place for foreign direct investment, a great place for any site selection. Obviously, the success that is Norrisk, and perhaps there's others in the wings, are part of what fuels that enthusiasm. But getting out there, doing it, that's why I always wanted to show something. That's why the marina development was such a critical element to me, because it was something brand new, it was something that people could see, could touch, could walk on, and it didn't cost anybody any money. Now, my biggest disappointment is we didn't build it all out at once, because we really could have had a much bigger opportunity there. We'll get there. We'll get there over the next couple of years, but I think that we can start to really increase the pace of development here, the pace of enthusiasm. I'm really excited about where we're going to be 12 months from now and 24 months from now and 48 months from now, and I want to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are just about on time. Dr. Overton-Healy and I would like to thank the candidates for your participation, to Vision to Action for the sponsorship of tonight's debate, to Gisette Paez, who I think had probably the most difficult role tonight, keeping time. I keep looking at my stopwatch and which sign she's holding up, and I'm glad she was keeping track of it. And to the audience for being part of tonight's important discussion. And most important, please remember to get out and vote.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you very much.